It's been 5 years since I've been in high school, and I came to a startling realization that I don't necessarily miss high school. I miss the memories I created when I was in high school. I know some people have a very bad memories of high school. You know, they had the Disney bully victim experience, but I also know people who are very fond of high school, the Troy Bolton experience, minus the singing. But to be honest with you, high school in general was kind of mid. Like, you had to wake up at 7 a.m., go to school for 8 hours a day, learning stuff you'll never use in your life. My morning classes, I just didn't learn anything. I wasn't fully operational until like 1 p.m. at the end of school. When I was reflecting on my time in high school, you know, while I was letting the hot water in the shower hit my back while I spaced out contemplating my life, is that I missed that time period of my life before I became an adult, before all these responsibilities when I was in high school. You see, the good memories I have from high school isn't necessarily because of high school. I think it's more of the experiences you can get from going to high school and just being a carefree child with no worries in the world. In America specifically, once you turn 18, it's kind of a free-for-all. You have all these newfound responsibilities, and you're kind of forced to learn everything as you go. A lot of young people aren't taught how to be an adult, or they just didn't pay attention to their parents' advice, or their parents' advice was just outdated. And now you have to worry about college, especially paying for it. Doesn't really matter if you want to go or not. And student loans are a given for most people, and they aren't properly informed on how damaging they can be. Then you have things like credit cards that can be extremely predatory. Car loans. You're just juggling everything, hoping you don't drop something. In high school, one thing I took for granted was my friends. The unfortunate reality, at least for me, was that once we all graduated, I never saw most of them again. A lot of that has to do with the pandemic first propping up during my senior year of high school, so in-person classes ended abruptly in March. But even then, I kind of realized that I wasn't that close to a lot of people in high school. I was only friends with these people because we're physically close to each other. We saw each other every day. It's like falling in love with a coworker. You develop feelings over time because you're in close proximity all the time. But once we all became adults and went to college or whatever, my friendships kind of crumbled instantly. That without the high school part, the friendship part just didn't exist outside the classroom. And even the few people I kept in contact with after high school, those friendships also faded. Everyone was busy, trying to figure their life out and what they wanted to do with it. And since those high school friendships weren't that strong, at least for me, it was easy for them to be forgotten by both sides. And once you're in college, making friends is kind of difficult, especially if you're an introvert, don't join a club, or make an effort to get friends. In high school, the person sitting next to you shares two of the same classes with you, and you'll see each other 5 days out of the week. In college, it's hard to build those connections with people, even if they sit right by you, because their schedule is going to be completely different. They might not even show up to their classes after a few weeks, or straight up drop out. You have to make an effort to be friends with someone in college. In high school, I was a huge introvert and still made friends by just existing. So when I was in high school, I was told constantly how hard college is going to be and how tough the professors are going to be on you. That wasn't the case. Quite the contrary. High school for me, in a lot of ways, was much more demanding than college, at least the first year of college, probably because of mandatory attendance. In high school, you had to go. Growing up, I was so scared of missing a day that I think throughout my K-12 years, excluding me actually being sick, I missed like 5 days of school. And part of that has to do with me being a goody two-shoe, but I also hated making up classwork. In college, at least for the classes I was in, attendance wasn't mandatory except for like 2 or 3 of them. So guess what happened? I wouldn't always show up, especially if it was a morning class. I remember taking this in-person class on campus, and it was scheduled for 10 a.m. One of the few morning classes I took in college. Do you know how many times I showed up for that class that semester? Once. The first day of school. Showed up, teacher said attendance wasn't mandatory, and all tests would be online, and I was never seen again. The responsibilities for you showing up was on you. In high school, you had to go. The parents were responsible for you showing up. Which leads me to another point actually. One thing that I missed about my high school years was how disciplined I was. Junior and senior year of high school was the most disciplined I've ever been in my life, even accounting for the 5 years I've been an adult so far, because I had to go to school. I'll wake up at 7 a.m., go to school until 3 p.m., went home, got dressed for work, worked from 4 to 9, went straight to the gym for an hour, and from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. played video games. That was my schedule for 2 years. My homework I just did 5 minutes before class or during lunch. Studying, never did that. But once I got into college, all that discipline went right out the window. because I didn't actually have discipline. So what happened was that I regressed as a person, physically and mentally. I tried to consistently work out, I tried to show up to my classes, I just didn't have the foundation to stick to a schedule. I would stay up and wake up late, lay in bed for a few hours, doom scrolling, go to 2 of the classes I had that day, probably skip one of them, go home, and play video games. Like I mentioned earlier, one major reason why I missed my high school years was the lack of responsibilities. I didn't really have to take life seriously. Of course, I had my parents yapping that I have to take my life seriously if I want to do anything with it, but as a kid, I just ignored them. How right they were. It's kind of crazy how alone being an adult is. I think a stat was like 90% of the time you spend with your parents is before you turn 18, and that can also be applied to people you consider as friends, especially during high school. Even if you have them, there's a good chance you don't see them all too often. Even when you talk to your parents, they don't really have a lot of actual friends, maybe on Facebook, but that's it. They usually just have each other. I think that's just how life is. People move away, people get other obligations, like work or their family. I don't know how to put into words, but being an adult isn't as glamorous as I thought it would be. Even with all this newfound freedom you have, you still are restricted, because now you have to worry about making money, sustaining yourself. If you come from a decent upbringing, you don't have to really worry about that, but as an adult, especially if you're trying to be somewhat financially responsible, everything looks expensive. Just existing comes with a bill. And we do a lot of dumb things when we are younger, so credit cards become our friends. A lot of young people prioritize fun over everything else. Consequences be damned. We were never taught discipline, so we make a lot of bad decisions when we are younger that will affect us when we are older. When I was in high school, the dumbest decision I could make for myself was like going on a shopping spree with my first paycheck. As an adult, maxing out a credit card is like the norm for dumb decisions. Overall, I don't miss high school, I miss being a kid. I miss not having all these responsibilities. My advice to you, the audience, no matter if you're in or out of high school, is that if you want something to happen, whether a friendship, a job, a love life, you have to put in effort. You have to try over a long period of time. You can't let failure hold you back or discourage you. There is no shortcuts in life, unless you're rich. You just have to live. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and adios.